welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 151 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 7 of A Storm of Swords, that's Jon 1.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter, we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise the happenings, discuss our thoughts on them, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll give you some extra information, which will be particularly handy if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing just fine. How are you, my friend?
I'm okay. Good. Just packed my niece back off to the UK after 7 weeks here.
That's right. Yes. I never even got to meet her. I'm really bummed about that.
Yeah, she's a good kid. She's a good kid. We had a nice time.
Good.
I'm saying that because she might listen one day. You know? No, she's a good kid. We enjoyed her visit. And plus it just made us do things. You know what I mean? If we'd been here for the summer, we'd have just sat around doing nothing. But we did a bunch of stuff because she was here.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's usually what prompts doing things when you're in your hometown.
Yeah.
Well, that's good stuff. Yeah, we've got most of my wife's family is coming into town this weekend, and they'll be here for like a week or so. And you know, this has been an ongoing saga. We've had a bit of a furniture swap as Ethan took our furniture and Stacy went out and bought multiple sets of new versions of the furniture. Yes. So one of the couches came in today, which is great because it came in just in time for someone to be able to sleep on it.
Okay.
And except for that, so it's a sectional couch. So it's got like the traditional couch part, and then it's got a chaise lounge that sticks out on the left side.
Yep, I can picture the thing. Yes.
Okay. Well, it was delivered today, and the two nice gentlemen that were the moving team started their way up the stairs, and the guy on the bottom of the couch part said, "Wait, nope, gotta go back out." And the other guy and I were both like, "Well, that's an odd thing to say right about now while you're on your way up the stairs." And so they walked their way back down the stairs and out the door, and he's like, "I can feel it in my hand. And we look, the whole side of the chaise lounge part was busted in. Like the wood was sticking out through the material.
Oh no.
So luckily the other part seems to be all right, and it's long enough that someone can sleep on it. It's missing the whole left part of the couch.
Oh, I see. So they're going to replace that section.
Yes, because it came in two separate pieces.
I see.
So,
well, okay. I mean, it could be worse.
It could be, yes. Yeah. And above the two pieces, that's the one that's less important.
Right.
If it had just had a chaise.
You still have a couch.
Yes.
Rather than just an odd object hanging around your room.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
So did he puncture it there and then, or did he notice it?
He said he could feel it in his hand. It was so busted. I watched, unless it happened while they were getting it off the truck, because I wasn't up there for that. It must have been like that, because I watched them wheel it down the sidewalk from my driveway, and I held the door while they went up in it, up through it, and I didn't see any place where something could have gotten that busted, to the point that the wood was sticking out of the fabric. I mean, it was clearly dropped from a distance or something.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't have much, but it is very hot at the moment.
It sure is.
I played tennis at lunchtime today.
Oh,
and it was
lunchtime.
Yeah, it was very, very hot. And I've just replaced the grip on my tennis racket, and the new grip is not quite as sticky as I'm used to.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, I mean, you already guessed where this goes. So I hit this rocket forehand and ball rockets and racket rockets. And the racket flew into the fence to the side of the thing. But the point was still alive. And you know me. You know what I bring to sports is a little bit of industry, a little bit of get up and go.
Yes.
So I race over there and pick that thing up, and I run back on the court, and I hit the ball back. But he said it bounced twice.
I thought you were going to say you got to it. Yes. You and I have been playing sports together for coming up on 20 years, and your two biggest assets are the fact that you have a tireless engine and you have a competitive streak that I don't know many people that have the competitive streak that you have. Even when we were just shooting around, shooting baskets, you and I, you'd be like, okay, we gotta play a game. I can't just do this.
We were in our work clothes.
Yes.
I was like, come on, this is boring.
It was like your first day of work at our company. We just went up to mess around and shoot some hoops. And you talked me into playing a game. So, yes, I would not have been shocked if you said you managed to get to that racket and get the point.
He might have been cheating. I mean, I don't know. Because I had to keep my eye on the racket, and I just had an inkling that he would just lob it back into the empty court, thinking there was no danger since I had no racket.
Could you swat it?
It happened yesterday too. I dropped my racket yesterday as well, and then that time it just came straight back to me, and I was tempted to kick it, but I'm pretty sure that's against the rules. It's blistering out there though.
Maybe you need to tape the racket to your hand.
To my hand.
Yes,
I like that plan.
That might be the next step there.
Yeah. All right. Let's get down to business. How did we leave Jon Snow? Last we saw of Jon, he'd just killed Qhorin Halfhand in single combat. Well, to be honest, in single combat, Qhorin would have won easily, but Ghost intervened to give Jon the edge.
Right.
He understood his mission, but having to slay a man he'd come to revere and trust was clearly going to play on his mind, being Jon Snow and all.
Right.
Rattleshirt was not fully appeased, but his subordinates were, and so Jon joined the party, at least until Mance Rayder could decide his fate. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
All right. Jon sees the wildling camp in the valley of the Milkwater. It's huge. The cookfires are beyond counting. Jon is with Rattleshirt, Ygritte, Leno, Ragwile, and Longspear Rick. In addition, Ghost trots along behind, while the ever-present eagle flies above.
The journey has been punctuated by Rattleshirt's threats and distrust, with the occasional reassuring word from Ygritte, who believes that Qhorin's death will suffice to gain him his freedom. Jon questions what his freedom will entail. Can he leave? Sure he can, but the wildlings would then be equally free to kill him if he did. As they climb down into the valley, 8 outriders join them and judge them friendly with a glance. Their leader is a known wildling, the Weeper.
He discusses Jon with the members of Jon's party. They bring up his dispatch of Qhorin, claiming that Jon's a warg. The Weeper says that he has a wolfish look. He waves them on toward Mance. The local dogs howl at Ghost, who pays them no mind. Jon observes that they know he's not their kind, and Jon thinks the same about himself among the free folk. While numbers and disposition of the warriors is part of Jon's mission, the real question is what power Mance was looking for, and did he find it?
He witnesses military preparations, weapons being fashioned and fighters being drilled, but he also notices a lot of children and families. They stop and make camp. Rattleshirt, Ygritte and Longspear lead Jon onwards. He notices that the camp is badly disorganised, and even a small, well-drilled mounted force would harry and demoralise this camp with impunity. They reach Mance's tent, and Ghost must stay without. Inside it is hot, and it's not clear who Mance might be. There are several men and women being serenaded by a musician.
Jon takes a guess at who's king, and is proved wrong when Mance puts down his lute and introduces himself, and stuns Jon by knowing who he is. Mance is genuinely conflicted about the news of Qhorin's death. Jon is introduced to Styr, the earless man he mistook for the king, and a white-bearded Tormund. Also to Mance's pregnant woman, Dalla, her sister Val, and Val's lover Jarl. Jon's sketchy with the truth over how he came to be in Qhorin's company, and Tormund accurately predicts it was Craster who told the crows where to look, but Mance fondly chastises Tormund for not giving Jon a chance to lie.
Mance asks the others, except Dalla, to leave so he can speak to Jon alone. Mance explains how he knew Jon. When Jon was small, Mance visited Winterfell with the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Mance stumbled upon Jon and Robb preparing a snowy surprise for some unsuspecting person and promised to not tell. That vow he kept, and Fat Tom paid the price. The other time turns out to be when Robert was in Winterfell. Jon is gobsmacked. Mance heard of the visit, slipped over the wall, and joined the entourage south of Winterfell and earned his keep as a musician.
Jon compares the exploit to Bale the Bard. Mance admits that Bale was his inspiration, but also admits that he only sang the songs. Bale lived them. Mance explains that he deserted because a wildling woman saved him after he was mauled by a shadow cat. While he healed, she sewed up his tattered cloak with red silk from a shipwreck. It was her greatest treasure. When he got back to the Shadow Tower, he was issued a new cloak. His decorated one was fit only for the flames. He left the next day.
So why did Jon desert? He comes up with a great lie. You were there. You saw where I sat at the feast. Oh yeah, with the lowest of the low, while the Trueborn Starks were at the top table with the royals. Mance is convinced. We'd best find you a new cloak.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Jon was quick with the lie. I guess he had time. He had
he had
to
a long
prepare
time,
some
but
stories.
except, of course, it was situational because of what Mance told him. You know.
True. Yes.
I mean, it could have been already in plan. You know, hey, the Starks always treated me as a second-class citizen. I gotta say, Mance feels a little trusting here. I mean, Jon's story is paper thin. He killed Qhorin, but the witnesses to Qhorin's death know A, that Jon was very lucky, and B, that Qhorin initiated the fight.
Right.
So
yes.
Jon was simply fighting for his life. He wasn't necessarily betraying the Night's Watch at that point.
That's a very solid, very astute observation. Yes, right.
And so, and this story, I mean, okay, I can understand why you might betray the Starks, but to betray the Night's Watch and the kingdom south of the Wall seems like a big leap from this.
Yes, it does. It doesn't quite explain why, because the Starks mistreated you or you felt you were not given your rightful respect due, why would you...
If Qhorin's last name was half Stark, maybe... But I don't know, there's something just doesn't hang together. It feels like Mance is a little too willing to accept him. And maybe Mance is thinking, let's keep my enemies close, you know?
Yes, that's very possible.
I don't actually trust this guy, but let's bring him in.
And it's also possible that Mance really wants to believe him.
Right.
Really.
He wants a friend, wants someone with a common background to him.
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm. I will say, just to mention, when we get to the TV show, he has a very different lie. And I'd like to, at that point, we might compare the two lies to see which one's more convincing.
I like it. We'll compare the book with the TV show.
Which is kind of what we're supposed to be doing.
So Jon and we both get introductions to the free folk / wildling, whatever you want to call them, society beyond the one-offs that we've met so far, like Ygritte and Craster. This is the first time we've seen basically all the wildlings in one location here. Get an idea of how many there are and kind of what their daily lives are like. Yes,
and you're right about the numbers. I mean, we already knew this, but the numbers are vast. I mean, he says there are more fires than Jon could count, hundreds, perhaps thousands. I noticed in the TV show I counted 8. It was a low angle. Probably there were more beyond.
Right.
He says it basically. So you got the river running through this valley, and then alongside the river you have the sort of second river of flickering lights, which is nice imagery. Well done.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, in some ways there's some similarities. There's also some differences, but in some ways his experience here feels similar to Dany's with the Dothraki. Neither had a say in the matter of joining this group. Both came in with preconceived notions of the people and the culture. And now we've seen Dany learn to embrace the Dothraki culture, But of course, she had the guidance of Khal Drogo, her handmaids, Jorah. Well, we don't know yet whether or not Jon will be so lucky as to feel well. And also, she came in a very high place in the Khalasar.
Well, yes, true, higher than Jon, but here he is in the tent of the king beyond the wall. I mean,
Yes,
it's not
that's a
like
good
he's
point.
having
Yep.
to climb the slippery pole to get there. They brought him straight to him. And Mance clearly wants to hang out with Jon, to a certain extent, anyway.
Right. Yes, I think the fact that he is a former brother, well, at least as Mance thinks, former brother of the Night's Watch, might elevate him in status immediately, which might rub people the wrong way. You know, if he's palling around with the king and the king's court, for lack of a better word here, people who have been working their way trying to get to that kind of elevated status might resent him for it.
Yeah, of course, Mance could appease them by saying, "I'm just keeping an eye on him. I don't trust him," sort of thing. But
that's
true. It's definitely something to watch for because I really don't know where this is going. I mean, it's possible that Mance might say, Rattleshirt, keep an eye on him, kill him if he does something. It might be that they become firm buddies, and then Jon starts to become conflicted, very much as you say, like Daenerys, who became more and more Dothraki. Maybe Jon becomes more and more of a sympathizer to the wildling cause.
Yeah, very possible. One difference is that Jon comes in with allegiance to another opposing group. Dany doesn't, when she married Khal Drogo, she didn't come in being, associated with a group that was an enemy to the Dothraki. Yeah. So I guess he multiple times thinks in his head, I'm here to do a task. I'm not here to become buddies with these people.
But if he keeps chanting that, it will sound more and more like he's trying to convince himself.
True. Yes. Right.
Now he's trying to remind himself. If his bonds with these people grow, it might change into trying to convince himself.
Yes, that very well is possible.
And actually, this goes to sort of like the cleverness of the story in some ways, because we've complained several times about the point of the Night's Watch and how they sort of target the wildlings, even though the wildlings aren't really doing anything to hurt the Seven Kingdoms.
Right.
So the chances of Jon becoming sympathetic to the wildling cause are that much greater, because their cause is basically sympathetic. They are trapped north of the wall, and some unspeakable evil is about to descend upon them,
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a very solid point. Yes, very much. So, since Jon is the boots on the ground here, he assesses the chaotic, haphazard nature of the camp, and also notices that they have very little in the way of defense, which would make attacking this large collection, this army, for lack of a better word, rather easy. In his assessment of what he's seen.
Yes, all you have to do is gather together an army, go north of the wall, tramp through the Frostfangs for 5 days, and attack them. Piece of cake. I have to say, it is definitely possible that Mance Rayder said, just pitch your tent wherever. When we march south towards the wall, there'll be more instructions about the way we pitch our tents.
That's possible. That's possible. Of course, that would mean that Mance does not know about the great ranging sitting on the Fist of the First Men, which I'd find a little surprising because of they've kept bonfires burning basically on the top of that hill for quite a while now. It seems like someone may have noticed, but it's a vast area with lots of hills, so maybe not.
Yeah.
But we do know that Lord Commander Mormont last in the prologue, with the Chet prologue, decided to do a surprise attack on this army. And, based on what Jon is seeing, it's possible that they might be able to pull it off, even though they're so heavily outnumbered.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing is, of course, is that when the small groups were coming into the Frostfangs, they got quite close to the army. They didn't get all the way. The only reason that the army was spotted was through Ghost's eyes, remember? When all 300 of them come, they're going to get spotted early, and then you can tighten up your defensive formation,
Well, there's that, yeah. I think Smallwood and his group did see the outriders of the kind of the vanguard of Mance's much larger group, and I think they got some idea of how many people were up there, but maybe not a completely accurate account of what's coming their way.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mance does not think they're in any danger up there, and
Right.
if they do march south towards the wall, he will expect more threats, and so the defenses can tighten up.
Yeah, and now of course we know that the White Walkers have seemed to have arrived at the Fist of the First Men. At least we heard 3 blasts anyway, and Chet peed his pants.
Right.
So, but
yeah,
or
3 separate groups of Night's Watch have arrived.
Yes. Yeah, but Jon feels like a surprise attack by a smaller, better armed and trained and skilled force might be successful, and he sees a man making wooden spears, and he sees people in leather and just bits of steel, mostly just boiled leather and wool. So they are heavily out-armed.
Yeah, but I mean, still, you can take bites out of an army this big, and you can demoralize them, but they're going to learn your tactics and defend against them, and their sheer weight of numbers will whittle you down.
You would think so. You would think this heavily outnumbered, like tens of thousands.
Yeah, against 300.
Yeah, right.
So the comparison with the Khalasar is quite interesting, actually, because they too sort of like pitched their tents wherever and were kind of relaxed about things. In many ways, I think for the same reason, that they didn't feel like they had any enemies, that they were... I mean, literally, the wildlings think that they're the only people north of the wall. There's nothing to guard against,
Yes, right.
Because they don't know about the Great Ranging. And similarly, I mean, the Khalasar had other Khalasars to worry about, but...
Yeah, Khal Drogo's Khalasar was like 40,000 people strong.
Yeah.
So you would think you'd... Almost like a roving city, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are some differences there because... This seems rather rare for the wildlings to be gathered like this. They usually seem to be in wildling villages, whereas the Dothraki, that's kind of their thing, is they're roving Khalasar, and they only pay special visits to Vaes Dothrak, where they congregate in one location for any kind of extended period of time.
Yeah. So Jon doesn't know what to make of all of this freedom. I mean, we've mentioned, I think, even in the last chapter, that he was amazed at the lack of respect that Rattleshirt received from Ygritte and Rick and the others, and the lack of structure of the camp sort of like adds to that view of what's all very well being free, but if you're not disciplined, you're going to pay the price.
True, right? Yeah. It feels like he can only really take in this scene through the lens of his experience, which is how most of us take in, especially new things. He grew up in Winterfell under the guidance of Ned Stark, where discipline and structure are heavy focus. And then he goes to Castle Black, where there's a similar discipline and structure. So all this freedom must just look like complete chaos to him.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Yeah, and it is interesting that Mance is styled as the king north of the wall, because it does seem that there's a distinct lack of respect for leadership.
Right.
Yes.
So
I wonder if it is just the sense of the common enemy here, the White Walkers, that's brought them together under one flag.
Yes, I've been thinking about it all week, that the fact that they would all fall under the guidance of a particular man, a king beyond the wall, in some ways goes against their whole philosophy.
Yeah.
Their whole free folk. That's what they call themselves, the free folk. And here they are, all falling in line under one king. And yes, like you said, maybe it's out of necessity. They're willing
like
to do this.
Existential threat to change your sort of philosophy.
Right. Yes. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. They've
and the other thing is, it is expedient to choose Mance as a leader at this point because he has intel about where they need to go. Because where else are the wildlings going to go to escape the White Walkers than the other side of that 700-foot wall? And
not many places.
Mance is the one person who, as we learned later in the chapter, apparently knows how to get across the wall. He's done it during this book. He's done it.
Yeah. Now, of course, he said the wall can stop an army, but it can't stop a single person.
He made that exact point, and that's true. But I mean, it goes to the fact that he does know its strengths and weaknesses, and so he's the man you choose for leading you at this moment if you were to choose a leader for the first time.
He's been on both sides of the wall, and he's got the knowledge that a lot of the others don't. Yeah.
So Jon and Ygritte talk about freedom, and Ygritte says in their hearts all crows want to be free, and I think she's got a point there actually, because
definitely
very few of them seem to follow their vows like Qhorin Halfhand does.
Yes, I thought the same thing. I thought in my head she's more right than she might realize that she is. Because...
She's probably just poking Jon, but she's actually hitting on a truth.
Yeah. So many of them were sent there as punishment for a crime.
Right.
They're not there. A great majority of them are not there because they wanted to be these members of the Night's Watch.
Yeah. But Jon tests the bounds of this freedom. He says, am I free to leave? And Ygritte, I mean, it's a reasonable answer. She says, sure, you're free to leave, but then we're free to kill you because if you decide to leave, then you were a spy all along, and so we're going to kill you,
Right.
She doesn't spell all that out, but that's what she means. And if I were Jon, I'd be a little bit more subtle about my long-term plans.
Yes.
I mean, it would have been worse if you'd said, after I've gathered intelligence, am I okay to leave?
When I've gotten everything I need from you all. Yeah. She says freedom is a dangerous thing, but then she adds that most like the taste of it. You'll see. Yeah. So, her two bits, in their hearts, all crows want to be free, and then freedom's dangerous, but most like the taste of it. You'll see. It makes me wonder if maybe he'll meet other brothers aside from Mance in this wildling party.
Yeah.
We saw when we met Osha, when Bran and Robb and Theon met Osha, she was with Stig, who is a brother of the Night's Watch who had fled. Right. So,
but he wasn't necessarily had he been a traitor on the north side of the wall, or
I don't think we know. I don't. Right. If that was mentioned, I don't recall.
Right. More likely, he bumped into them as they were trying to get across the wall, and he was like, "Yeah, let's go together. I don't like it here very much."
Very possible.
Yeah. So Jon, of course, is still thinking like a black brother, as we've mentioned. He's sort of reminds himself that he needs to see, to hear, to learn, and take it back to Castle Black. And because of what Qhorin Halfhand gave up to put him in this position, he feels it's a very solemn duty.
Yes, and that is a good point. This cost Qhorin his life. So as many times as he might, even if he begins to become swayed by the wildling life,
to get that taste for freedom.
Yes, Qhorin had to give up his life for it. So that is definitely something to think about, or that he will need to think about as he's going along this task that he's been assigned.
Qhorin was pretty sure he was toast anyway. I mean, that's one thing that might appease Jon's guilty conscience, is that Qhorin was for it, and in probably a much worse way than he died at Jon's hand.
Yes, that's very possible, yes. Yeah. And if Jon also, he sees the women fletching arrows, and he thinks that those arrows were made for his brothers of the Night's Watch and his father's people, those, in Winterfell and Last Hearth. And so he's still, like you said, he's still thinking like a brother of the Night's Watch. And in some ways that he needs to cling to that. He needs to remember, regardless of how he starts to feel, he needs to remember what the point of this task is. But on the other hand, it could make it tough to carry out the plan successfully if he too much acts like a brother of the Night's Watch. So what are you doing that for?
Yes. Yeah.
Where do you keep these things? What'd you guys find up in those mountains?
How are we getting across the wall?
So he's got to really balance, really walk a fine line here. So Jon, eventually makes it into Mance's tent, and Mance asks Jon how many were there in your group, but he looks to Rattleshirt for the answer. And Rattleshirt says there were 5 crows, 3 dead, 1 climbed a mountain that the horses couldn't follow, and then Jon is here. And so he's talking about Stone Snake, and Stone Snake was on foot because his horse broke its leg after seeing a shadow cat, and Qhorin gave him a new task rather than fleeing with Jon and Qhorin. He said, you have a skill that nobody else can match. Your single talent makes you unique that you can scale these mountains, and so sends him off to do that with a task to tell Mormont what Jon saw in his dream, which was giants, wargs, and worse, and the trees have eyes again. That was the message he wanted Stone Snake to deliver. But then Rattleshirt also mentions that Jon killed Orell, which, as we can deduce based on the people we know Jon has killed, is the name of the man killed on the mountaintop that he and Stone Snake came across before he spared Ygritte.
Right. All the way through the camp, and before they got to the camp, they were being followed by the eagle soaring on great wings that they'd seen previously. Presumably the eagle that helped trap Jon and Qhorin as they tried to go through the tunnel.
Right, yeah. That eagle has alerted the wildlings to their presence since they began to flee after Jon's dream with Ghost.
And presumably also the eagle that hurt Ghost, right? I mean,
yes, you would think so. Yes.
Yeah.
And the last Jon chapter at the end of Clash of Kings, Ygritte said, I don't have the exact quote, but something along the lines to Jon of that eagle hates you, Jon Snow.
Right.
And we haven't yet learned why the eagle hates him, I don't believe. So
okay.
We won't go down that road right now.
Okay.
But, the Stone Snake news is news to Jon that the wildlings hadn't found and killed Stone Snake. So, of course, he was alone on foot in the Frostfangs. He very well could have succumbed to the elements. But at least as far as Jon's found out, they have not killed Stone Snake yet. Or caught him anyway.
But honestly, he's not bringing an awful lot of intel back that Smallwood didn't bring back himself, right? I mean, they know they know roughly where they are, and they know there's a lot of them. Sure, some of the supernatural parts of it will be news, but
we'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Right, yes, that's the part that Qhorin wanted Mormont to have, is that there's supernatural things, giants, wargs, and worse. The trees have eyes again, all that kind of stuff seems to be what he wanted him to convey to Mormont. Another thing about Rattleshirt is that this happens earlier in the chapter. Jon's band comes across the Weeper and his band, and Rattleshirt almost kind of tries to take credit a little bit for killing Qhorin by saying, the Weeper says, "What's with the crow you got there?" And he says he's turned cloak, he's scared that I'll take his bones like I did Qhorin Halfhands. And then Long Spear Rick outs him and says, yeah, Jon, the crow killed Qhorin Halfhand.
You see, that's why you need a little bit more authority. You see, I like my role as a manager in my group, because I'm like, okay, when I tell my boss this, I want you all to keep stum about the truth. Okay?
Right. When I take credit for something, no one outs me on it.
So Rattlesnake says that that if Mance finds Jon false, which Rattlesnake certainly believes he will. I'm calling him Rattlesnake now.
We've got Rattleshirt and Stone Snake. This is a bad combination right here.
So Rattleshirt tells Jon that if Mance finds him false, which Rattleshirt certainly believes he will, then Rattleshirt gets to kill Jon, and he's looking forward to that. But it does kind of clearly states that Rattleshirt... Well, I think Rattleshirt could have dispatched Jon if he'd had the backing of his group. The problem was he never had that backing, because everybody else thought Jon had proved himself to be loyal to the wildlings, traitorous to the Night's Watch by killing Qhorin. So, I guess what he's looking for is a higher authority to give him permission to do what he wants to do against the wishes of everybody else.
True. Yes, that seems like that's exactly what he's looking for. But Ygritte has the opposite thought. She says Mance will accept Jon when he learns that Jon killed Qhorin, and so that nobody will be able to kill Jon like Rattleshirt has just claimed he's going to do. Yeah.
So Jon figured that Styr or Tormund must be Mance because they look like warriors. And of course, he was playing the lute. You wouldn't think that would be the king.
Right.
When Mance reveals himself, he introduces Tormund, and he just says, "This is Tormund," and Tormund's like, "Wait a minute, I want some of my honorifics, please." So Mance then calls him Giant's Bane, Tall Talker, Thunder Fist, Husband of Bears, Father of Hosts, and Mead King of Ruddy Hall, and the Hornblower, Breaker of Ice, and Speaker to Gods.
Yeah, those are quite the titles right there.
Yeah.
So,
I guess if you're winging it, you might come up with those kinds of things. It sounded like there was some reality behind them, yes?
Yeah, but at least behind some of them. I mean, so we could take them one at a time, and just, I don't know if, I've got them listed here, I don't know if they're in the exact order that he said them in, but, so, Giant's Bane, possibly he killed a giant, that, or at least... in the very next one, Tall Talker, maybe at least tells a tale that he's killed a giant.
Which is how he got several of these honorifics, presumably.
Right.
Thunder Fist, I mean, I'm guessing he can hit things pretty hard. He's a big, strong lad.
Right, yeah. And Husband to Bears reminds me a lot of Mage Mormont, because it's rumored that she... that her children are the product of Mage and a bear. So, I guess they've got that going for them together there.
The Father of Hosts, presumably he's got a lot of children, and the Mead King may suggest he's a bit of a drinker as well. I'm beginning to like this fella.
Seems like a good enough guy. Then we get into Hornblower, Breaker of Ice, and Speaker to Gods. And we're just meeting this guy, so there's we can only make conjectures about things. And Hornblower, I was thinking about it. I was actually listening to the chapter while I was walking the dog right before we started recording, and a couple thoughts came to my mind about some of these here. Hornblower, I thought maybe he likes to brag of deeds that he's done. He likes to blow his own horn.
Yeah.
That is possible.
Yeah.
And then Speaker to Gods, there's one piece of description in this chapter that says that Tormund has gold bands graven with runes that bound his arms. And so maybe he's got some sort of religious, old gods type connection that we haven't been introduced to yet.
Yes. When I hear Hornblower and Breaker of Ice as a combination, then that does make me... That takes me back to the Battle of Jericho. because I have my biblical background that you heathen don't, and but if that feels like if you had a big enough horn that had magical powers, you might be able to blow down the wall and get out of the. So maybe these are what he's saying. Maybe
that's very possible.
This is a clue towards what Mance was looking for.
That's absolutely very, very possible. Yes, and the only horn that we've had reference to in a while is the one that Ghost led Jon to, that old war horn that was buried with the dragon glass.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't say whether those things are related or not. But yes, breaker of ice. Certainly, we know there's a 700-foot wall of ice. It could also mean that they were up in the Frostfangs, and Jon, through Ghost's eyes, saw them digging a whole bunch of holes. So maybe that was the breaking of ice.
Yeah. Or, they needed water from the river. It was covered in ice, and he knocked it through.
Could be all these things.
So Jon is pretty cool under pressure when he's talking to Mance. Mance asks if there were just 5 rangers. Jon says yes. I will say he's cool under pressure, but I think he lies about the wrong things. I think he needed to be more upfront about some of these things.
Okay. Yeah.
Because his lies are going to get found out and hurt him. For example,
yes,
is his plan to find the information he needs and then hightail it out of there in the next 3 days? Because if that's true, then he can get a message to Jeor Mormont in time for him to use that information to his advantage. But if this is going to be more of a long-term thing, then this army is going to, as you said earlier, it's going to discover the Great Ranging by itself. And denying the Great Ranging, which is basically what he did.
Yes. Right. I see what you're saying.
Creating a huge lie that you're going to get caught by very quickly. And I just think he's made a bad mistake here. So the 5 rangers, I would have said, no, there are 3 groups of us. Why not? The other groups have turned round now, Or been captured and killed,
Yeah, sure. I definitely see what you're saying. If this army comes across 300 men sitting on the Fist of the First Men, Jon's story about how just he and 4 other guys went ranging might seem a bit
it's like
false.
Pulp Fiction, the scene when the guy forgets to tell them about the guy hiding in the bathroom with the big gun, and he comes out So Jon, why didn't you mention these 300 armed men hunting
I thought you
down?
had turned your cloak.
Exactly.
That's a very good observation. I like that.
Yeah. Mance asked Jon how he knew where the wildlings were, and Tormund jumps in with, Craster will have told them. But you see, Mance was actually setting a trap to get Jon in another lie, and Tormund saved him from it, because apparently Jon was planning to lie about everything. Oh, we read it in the weather,
Yeah, so either the other 2 groups, we know there were 3 groups, you had just mentioned, there are 3 groups that went ranging up into the Frostfangs. Either the other 2 groups haven't been spotted, or Mance knows about them, and he's lying to Jon about not knowing, or not revealing to Jon that he knows, and but actually does know. So I think you mentioned earlier, Qhorin Smallwood was the leader of the group that went up the Milkwater, and then Jarman Buckwell's group went up the giant stairs. Now we know Qhorin Smallwood's group came back to the Fist of the First Men because we heard it in Chet's prologue.
Right.
Jarman Buckwell, I don't believe we've heard anything from him or his men yet. So either they're still up there or something has befallen them.
I mean, that one's not so bad because you've got plausible deniability. They only sent the 5 of us out. Maybe they sent more groups. I don't know.
Maybe they sent groups out after us when we didn't come back in time.
Yeah. I mean, we left Castle Black several weeks ago now, the 5 of us. No, you didn't. We see you over there on the Fist of the First Man. Big fire.
Or maybe Jarman Buckwell's group is coming back in different bits, and that's what those 3 horn blasts were. Hey, there's some over there. No, they were over there, too. Jon, so like you were saying, Mance asks Jon, why were you what were you doing up in the Frostfangs? He says we were ranging. He said, I think it was Styr says, why were you ranging in the Frostfangs? And Jon says, because all the villages were empty. He says that the villages, everyone had vanished from the villages. And Mance's response is, I, and not just the free folk. And I wondered, what did he mean by that line? That wasn't just the free folk that have vanished.
Yes, it's funny you say that, because that line struck out to me as well. And I have no explanation for it. Because everybody north of the wall is the free folk, surely.
Right.
Unless he means their livestock.
Yes, we'll see that. That's one of the things I was wondering. We noticed in the Jon chapters while they were traipsing through the forest that there weren't many animal noises. It's been quite quiet. They haven't seen a lot of animals. Now, that could be because 300 men are traipsing through the forest with horse and wagon and animals. Or could he possibly have meant what we were looking for in the Frostfangs had vanished? He thought he knew where it was, and it wasn't there, and he's saying, yeah, it's not just the free folk that are vanished. What we've been looking for has also vanished.
That makes sense. Yeah. He might also mean that the members of the Night's Watch keep disappearing, because, of course, we know from Sir Waymar Royce and Will and Garrett, well, at least one of Will, because of the TV show switching it around. I never remember which one it was who was killed north of the wall.
I know. I believe Garrett is the one in the books that survived.
Okay, so Will and Waymar went missing, and then certainly Benjen Stark is missing. So.
And his whole group as well.
And his whole
they found
group, right.
The two that came back as White Walker, or as as whites. They came back as whites. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, the rest, everyone else has all gone missing, and they do know that Garrett has been found because they found Ned Stark beheaded him. So
yes,
but other than that, they don't know where any of these people went. So yes, you're right. It very well could mean maybe he got wind of that.
Yeah. And of course, that might be what you say. You would say the free folk are vanishing, and it's not just the free folk. Yeah, that does. Right. That actually hangs together. And I was good explanation, Mackelly. I'm revealing that I'm reading your notes here. So Mance reveals to Jon how he knows who he was, because he's met him twice. The first time he was in Winterfell, when Mance was still a member of the Night's Watch, he was accompanying the then Lord Commander of the Night's Watch on a trip to Winterfell, and he bumped into Jon and Robb building a snow mound over a gate to dump on some unsuspecting person. And Mance kind of was friendly to them and said he would never tell anyone, and he didn't. This is a promise he was capable of keeping.
Yeah.
A piece of red silk couldn't stop him from keeping that. See?
It kind of reminded me of Olenna Tyrell using the familiarity with Sansa's grandfathers, and knowing Ned for telling the truth, as Mance establishing a previous connection with Jon to try and gain trust with
But this
Jon.
was a personal connection. I mean, Jon remembered it.
Yes.
Jon didn't deny it. But the second time was more substantial. I mean, this is as Mance Rayder, king north of the wall. He crossed the wall, infiltrated Robert Baratheon's party, came into Winterfell, played songs in Winterfell like Bael the Bard did, and was able to get intel on everyone, to the point where he recognized Jon Snow.
Yeah, there's definitely some Bael the Bard. You could see that, first thing that Jon blurts out when Mance tells him the story is, Bael the Bard.
Yeah.
And Mance admits that, yes, that was his inspiration. And there's definitely some similarities. He infiltrated as a singer, snuck into Winterfell incognito. Now, as Mance points out, he didn't steal either of Jon's sisters. So, there's that part, thankfully. But the fact that, so the reason Jon did not even consider Mance as king is because he kind of has an everyman appearance, which probably helped to go incognito. If he looked like a big, when you walk into a room, everyone notices you kind of presence, that might have hurt his ability to be not noticed to blend into the background.
Yeah.
If he looked like Styr, it might have stuck out a little bit more. Except for his ears would not have.
Of course, it is so close to the story of Bale the Bard that it smells of like telling a tall tale.
It does, yes.
So it may be that he remembers him from a child, but I mean, it's a lot harder to remember a child as an adult than it is if you saw him 6 months ago. That
is true.
So it does feel like it was probably true, and you wonder what was the point. I mean, he wanted to see King Robert. He probably wanted some intel on the Starks, sort of like maybe their willingness to send more troops to the wall to defend the wall.
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's a lot of hassle to go through.
Yeah.
You got to scale up and then back down a 700-foot wall, right. Not to mention all the territory you have to cover.
Right.
So you really got to be motivated to want to see king to king, as he puts it.
Yeah.
So Mance being raised by the Night's Watch poses a question. I think we've discussed it, or at least discussed similar concepts before. Should he have been made to take an unbreakable vow if he was never given an opportunity to see the rest of the world? He was taken in as like a 9-year-old.
Right.
And he wasn't there because of any punishment. He could have left if he decided not to join, but it was really all he knew, I guess.
Remind forgetful listeners of his backstory, if you would. I don't know why you're laughing.
Because it's just the listener's benefit.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking of here.
His parents were killed by Rangers, if I remember correctly. And
he was from north of the wall. That's the bit I was asking.
Yes, he's wildling born and raised to a point, and then taken in by the Rangers of the Shadow Tower and raised in the Shadow Tower, and then became a Ranger. Which, I mean, often you grow up in what you know. You do what you know. If your family is in the circus, you're probably going to grow up and be a member of the circus. If your family is in sales, you probably very well follow that path. So he grew up in the Night's Watch, and so he became a member of the Night's Watch. But that, he didn't have to. He wasn't convicted of any crime.
You already know my feeling about making children make promises. It shouldn't happen. You should never make children make promises, because they can't be expected to keep them, and therefore you devalue the promise by making a child make a promise. So don't do it.
Yep, I agree.
I'm with you. I have a lot of sympathy for Mance here.
You could argue that it's outdated to have lifelong terms for everyone in the Night's Watch. But then, on the other hand, it also allows men to commit more fully than if they only had a 10-year sentence that they had to pay off before they could go back to their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's the historical aspect as well. You want to keep that sort of like, it's a lifelong commitment thing going, but yeah. But Mance reveals that he didn't leave the Night's Watch for the crown. He doesn't even wear one, or the wildling women. He points out that plenty of Night's Watch brothers have, no more women than him in the biblical sense, and it's not because he had wildling blood. I mean, he says his blood is the blood of the first men, which the Starks share. So Jon has that too,
right? And I think Ygritte mentioned that as well.
Right. Yeah,
she
did.
Tied Bale. That's how she brought the Bale the Bard story up.
But instead he tells the story of his cloak getting sewn with red silk and how that cloak was then taken from him. So basically his desertion came down to sort of like bucking against the conformity, which to me goes to the wildling blood, honestly, because that's why you're bucking against the conformity. It's not ingrained in you.
Yeah, my thought when he told that story about how Dennis Mallister said his cloak, his newly red silk sewn in cloak was fit for nothing more than the fire now, and he left the next day, I thought it would have made just as nice tapestry. You could just mounted it on his wall in his chamber and kept doing his job. But I guess it was the principle. He just couldn't handle all this uniformity and having to conform to these rules.
Yeah. So Jon then reveals his lie, his story of leaving the Night's Watch, and how it's because he's Ned Stark's bastard, and how he was always treated as an outsider and less than the true-born children of the Starks.
Right.
Which, I think we've talked about it before. It doesn't feel that compelling. It feels like that's why he shouldn't have done what Ned wanted him to do. Shouldn't have joined the Night's Watch. Fair enough. Become a minstrel yourself. Become the next Bale the Bard yourself. Don't join the Night's Watch and then desert. That just doesn't seem to make any sense.
No, and of course, we, knowing Jon's backstory very well, know that him being the bastard of Winterfell is what drove him to the Night's Watch.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Not then out of the Night's Watch. So, but,
So again, I feel Mance gravitates to this story as if it was, just like vision from heaven. This is absolutely what I thought you'd say. To me, it feels not quite true that Mance is just like, let's bring this guy in. Let's find out what he's up to. That's my sneaking feeling about this.
That very well could be. Now, so Jon thinks right before he starts telling Mance the story that the story he's thought up in his head is the only one Mance is going to believe. And then he tells the story of him being a bastard and not treated as well as his siblings. And possibly Mance accepts it because it's a story about being an outsider and a misfit. And since Mance was an orphan wildling raised in the Shadow Tower, maybe he feels some of those same kind of
that's
feelings,
very true. That's
emotions.
Very true. And that's good thinking by Jon if that's what he thought through. Anyway, do you have some background for us?
I do. This is back to one of those chapters. I wish I could borrow some from Sansa 1 and just roll it over to this one. But I came up with a little bit. So Mance mentions that when he first went to Winterfell, the first time that he met Jon, it was as part of an escort for Lord Commander Corgyle. And as there's no reference to whether Corgyle is the Lord Commander's first name or his last name, we'll assume that it's his last name because there is in fact a House Corgyle in Dorne. The Corgyles are located in Sandstone, which, if you think of Dorne as kind of like a foot with Sunspear being out east in the toe, well, Sandstone would be in the western heel, surrounded by dunes. They're, of course, bannermen to the Martells, and their sigil is 3 black scorpions on a red field. Now, here's a debatable noteworthy point here. We know that G.R. Mormont became the 997th commander of the Night's Watch when Lord Commander Corgyle died in 288. So Mance has only been with the Free Folk, the wildlings, for at max 10 to 11 years. But Jon remembers that he thinks in his head when Mance is telling him the story of how he met Jon when Jon was a boy. Jon remembers Mance as a young black brother just a decade ago, and now describes him as having long brown hair gone mostly gray. And to our knowledge, that's without Mance having any kids. Dalla is pregnant with... We've not heard of any others than just the fact that Dalla is pregnant with his possibly first child. So, it just made me think, of course you could go gray at any age, but he thought of him as a young black brother like a decade ago, and now he's got hair gone mostly gray. And I was reminded of, like those, basically like heavy as the head that wears the crown, like those pictures of the presidents of the United States, like when they first take office, and then on leaving, just 4 to 8 years later, and how much they've aged.
Very good. Well, as a comparison with the television show, this is broadly captured. The relationship between Jon and Ygritte is played up more in the show. So she does all the talking with Jon on the way in. Rattleshirt and the other characters are basically dropped from that. Okay. Mance is not playing the lute, but Jon mistakes Tormund for the king, to much amusement. Mance doesn't know Jon. There's no talk of him going to Winterfell. None of that.
Okay.
Jon's rationale for desertion is that he saw what Craster did with his baby boy, lay it out in the snow for the White Walkers, and Jon witnessed the White Walker picking up the baby. Mance is clearly surprised to hear that Jon has actually seen a White Walker. This is sort of startles Mance.
Sure.
Jon says that he then took that news, what he'd witnessed, to Lord Mormont. And Lord Mormont, A, already knew, and B, did nothing. And that's why Jon's leaving the Night's Watch. He says, I want to fight for the living, and I'm willing to join an army that'll fight for the living.
Oh, that's a good story.
Yes.
I think after they left Craster's, Jon and Lord Commander Mormont did have a conversation about what happens to the boy babies, but Jon did, unless I'm terribly misremembering, Jon did not see that. I do recall that scene from the TV show, and so it's in my head there as well. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure Jon did not see that actually happen.
So what do you think? I mean, by comparison.
Oh yeah, I think the story that he gives in the TV show is much more believable for a reason to turn cloak against the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
The other one, yes, like you said at the beginning of this episode, makes more sense why he would turn cloak on the Starks, but has very little bearing on the Night's Watch.
Pedantry. Do you have anything? I didn't find anything, really. I mean...
No, I didn't. At first I thought that maybe Craster's Keep was too far from the Shadow Tower to where they are in the Milkwater for them to have, for Jon and his group that he is saying, they're 5, to have made it to Craster's, found out about them being in the Frostfangs, and made it to where they are in the Milkwater. But I looked it up on a map. It's not too bad. I mean, it's within realm of possibility.
The other thing is that could have been a separate sort of ranging. Went to Craster's, talked to Craster, brought the news back, news spread along the wall, and sort of different groups were sent out. Possibly. Yeah. News and notes.
So the first bit of news is, first I want to clarify news from last week. We mentioned that Martin canceled an appearance at San Diego Comic-Con due to rising COVID rates. That was true. He skipped public signing appearance. He didn't go on the convention floor, and he skipped all the parties that were going on as well. But he did attend a House of the Dragon panel at the Comic-Con. His next leg of the trip... Oh, by the way, that was added. I swear that was added to his Not a Blog update after I read it, because I'm pretty sure I would have. I went back and looked, and I was like, wait, there's an asterisk in here that says he is going to the panel. Anyway, the next leg of the trip was to the House of the Dragon premiere in LA. But unfortunately, Martin was a no-show for that because he's tested positive for COVID.
He should have done what you said.
He just stayed away entirely?
Exactly.
Now, there's not, according to him, there's not need for too much fear, because he's reported that he has nearly no symptoms, just some sniffles, and he's currently quarantined in a hotel room in LA. He said if you're got to quarantine somewhere, a 4-star hotel room in LA is not a bad place to do it. So,
there's an official HBO House of the Dragon Dracarys app. Allows you to... The AR of Dracarys is capitalized. Allows you to steal dragon eggs from Westeros, raise the dragons from hatchlings to Valyrian-like monsters using AR through your phone, and train it using high Valyrian commands. That sounds pretty cool.
That does sound pretty cool.
And we've got a live video chat coming up with our Lord Paramounts and Royal Kingsguards, but that will have happened by the time this one airs. So
it will, I'm sure. We'll have had a really great time, but yes, by the time this goes live, that will have already happened. So,
all right. So conclusion. So Jon passed his first test. It seems that he's been accepted by Mance as a true turn cloak, or at least Mance is willing to keep him around to find out.
Right. But like we mentioned earlier, will he have such luck with the rank and file wildling?
I actually think it might be easier there, because they'll hear he killed Qhorin Halfhand and they'll be like, they won't get the details. They'll just get the headline, and that will be enough for them.
Yeah, that's possible. Or, they're raised to distrust and dislike Brothers of the Night's Watch, much as, Brothers of the Night's Watch are told to dislike and distrust wildlings. So it's possible that, that he might have to prove himself to many of them as well.
Yes, I'll raise Mance Rayder as the first piece of evidence for the accepting.
Yeah, although Mance was born wildling,
Mance
so
wildling,
he's got that.
It's true. But
you have to wonder if being a Night's Watch and a Stark might elevate him in standing enough to get him close to Mance. He either needs to get close to Mance or needs to get close to someone who can tell him what in the world they were doing out in the Frostfangs and whether they were successful.
And then the question about Jon's sort of like story arc is he going to continue to see all this through his Night's Watch eyes, or is he, as Ygritte predicts, going to start to like the taste of freedom and
start
seeing this differently?
Yeah, and I wouldn't have expected him to at this point, but he's got no outright information about whether Mance found what he was looking for in the Frostfangs. It's not like he came in and Mance was like, "You want to see something cool? Look what we got." But they have left the Frostfangs, so either they left it in frustration with possibly a pinch of frostbite, or they found it and are keeping it hush-hush, which you would expect them to do with someone who says he's turned cloak on the group that they are trying to get past.
Yes. This could be why Mance threw Tormund out of the tent before he blabbed.
He does seem like the kind of guy who might just let it slip. But, it seems like Ygritte has steered him straight from the very beginning. From when she very first met Jon, she told him, "If you come with me, Mance will take you in." And, does seem like Mance is willing to take him in. So
yeah, maybe she helped him workshop some of his lies as well to see if
yes, they had time on the travel.
Anything else?
I think we've covered it.
That's pretty good.
How about you?
Okay. I feel good about it. There are 3 ways that you could help us. You could leave us a review. They're always appreciated. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you could buy us an arbor gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Join us at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level to become a sustainer, and we're grateful to those who already have.
Absolutely. And of course, you can always reach us at ghosts.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can go on and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.